So now I'm going to talk about an experiment on belief, and we're going to look at some variables that influence how much people will believe strange things. And this was carried out and reported in 2007 by King et al., the authors. The title of the paper is Ghosts, UFOs and Magic. It's exactly what you want from a psychology paper. And so, I'm going to go through 3 studies that are in this paper, looking at emotional state, see if that influences people's gullibility, if you like, and looking at their prior tendency to believe their intuitions. So the first study was, as the paper suggested, about UFOs and ghosts. And they recruited participants and they showed them 4 videos that had been cunningly edited to look like clips they'd taken off the local cable news TV channel. And in these videos, people were recounting strange things that had happened to them. Seeing a UFO or a ghost. And what the participants in this study had to do was say how convincing, how much they believed the report. And here's a graph. Psychology is full of graphs. It's a great way to present results. They asked their participants to fill out a questionnaire measuring how intuitive they were, how much they liked to go with hunches, how much right answers just got into their mind, things like that. So they were able to classify their participants as either high in intuition, over here on the right, or not using intuition. They liked to reason about things, have facts. They like to mull things over and not just make quick choices. So we've got low and high people. They also gave them a mood questionnaire to see if they were in a neutral mood or if they were happy. So the line that's got squares on are the people who are in a positive mood, who are happy, and the line with the triangles on are the people who are in the neutral mood. And then up on the vertical axis here, we've got how many of those 4 videos the people actually believed, accepted, in the same way that you could say yes or maybe yes to Michael's beliefs. Now you see, all of those triangles are in much the same place, around 3, 3.5. But this group, if we do the statistics, compare the means against the whole range of scores, we find that this group are higher statistically than the other 3. This is the most gullible group. They're the people who are normally believe their intuitions and who are currently in a positive mood. So being happy and an intuitive sort of person means you're more likely to accept these people's arguments about having seen a UFO or a ghost just because they seem convincing on the TV. Not examining any evidence, not questioning them, not saying, but surely. So in study 2 in this paper, they looked at something called sympathetic magic. Now this is something where objects take on the properties or attributes of something they resemble. And it's the basis of all sorts of folk remedies, like plant-based medicine. So you tend to find that plants that have a seed pod that's long and stands up like that tend to be used as an aphrodisiac or to cure impotency in men. Whereas leaves that are spotty can be used to cure measles, for example. So they carried out a study that they told their participants was a study into fine motor skills, throwing darts at a picture. So here's a dartboard. They asked their participants to throw 6 darts at this dartboard. 3 darts, I thought. So this gives us a baseline measure, perhaps. people are getting practice at throwing the darts. Okay, it's a fun experiment. Part 2 of the experiment. Okay, I'll make this easier for you. I'm going to put an outline of a face there, so if you focus on, see how many darts you can get into that target. Okay, this is the second time people have thrown the darts, so obviously they've had a bit of practice now. They know how much the darts weigh, how far away the dartboard is. As you'd expect, they get better. So now, perhaps their darts all land in the target. Well done. Now part 3 of the experiment. I'm going to replace that outline of a face with a picture of a face. Here's your darts. Let's see how many you can get in this target. What do you think happens? They miss more often. They should get better because they've had even more practice. In fact, they miss. Here's what happened in the data. So again, we split the participants using that questionnaire into low faith and intuition and high faith and intuition, and they measured their positive affect, i.e. how happy they were, and split them into low and high. And on the axis here, we've now got a change score. So it's, did they get better, in which case they will hit the baby more, they'll be above the line, or did they get worse and hit the baby less than the outline, they'll be below the line. And there's one group who hit the baby less, who got worse, who didn't get better through practice on this. And once again, it's the high faith and intuition people who are in a high positive mood. They're happy, they're gullible, they just can't bring themselves to throw the dart in the baby's face. Why? It's just a piece of paper. It's not a real baby. You can't do experiments like that. Our ethics committees would have conniptions. So that piece of paper has, for them, taken on the properties of a real human infant, and they are not going to throw a dart and do anything. They're not doing this consciously. It's just leading their arms astray. Third experiment, the law of contagion. Similar to the sympathetic magic one. Here it's arguing that not that objects take on the properties of things they look like, but that objects can take on the properties of things that they come into contact with. We can see this in clinical disorders like obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not enough just to sort of have a fear of germs. You start not wanting to touch things that other people might have touched in case the germs got in contact with that thing. So you won't use taps, you won't touch doorknobs, you obsessively clean things. So in this experiment, they got 2 people into the lab and they asked them to describe an unusual incident that happened to them in the last 24 hours. Now, one of these people was not a real participant. They were another experimenter. And this is a technique in psychology where we call them the stooge. They're like the magician's mysterious person in the audience. Yes, you, madam. Who the magician has worked out a script with. Well, this is the script that the stooge said. Okay, an unusual thing that's happened to me in the last 24 hours. Oh, well, I really don't know. Oh, I know. Well, it was pretty normal today. Until a few hours ago, when I had to use the restroom. It's America. I wasn't paying much attention. When I opened the stall door, and as I walked into the stall, I realised that I had stepped in something. The toilet had overflowed. When I looked down, I realised there was some poop on the floor and on my shoe. Okay, contagion. He's come into contact with me. Needless to say, I had to go home and change my shoes. So he's clean now. He's changed his shoes. There's no poo involved anymore. Okay. So then the real participant had to recount something that had happened to them. And the experiment said, okay, that's very good. Now we'll just go next door for the second part of the experiment. And they go next door. And there would be a chair. a chair sitting there, and the student would sit on the chair. And then the experiment would say, oh, sorry, I did ask for there to be 2 chairs. There's one over there. Would you mind awfully bringing that chair over here and sitting on it? So, the participant comes along, and what they're actually measuring in this experiment, of course, is how close do you go to the man who had poop on his shoe earlier today. It's clean now. End of experiment. So, what are the results? Another graph. Same faith high, faith low, neutral mood and positive mood. On the axis here, how far apart are the chairs? And it's not quite as clean as the other 2 experiments. No. The data is not quite as straightforward as the other 2 experiments. What we have here are that the high intuition people in the positive mood do indeed sit furthest away from the experiment. They are the ones that are most convinced he's still contagious. He is still hooey. Oops. But interestingly, the other 3 aren't all the same now. I don't think that there's not actually a statistical difference between the 2 means for the low group, so their mood isn't affecting it. But the high intuition people who aren't in a positive mood, actually, they're the group that sit closest. So there's something odd going on here. It shows you how important the mood is in influencing these thought patterns. It's not just the characteristic of the individual, their faith and intuition. It's a situational, a state factor as well. How happy, how content, how their emotional state is at the moment. So, summarising this, we have the people in a positive mood who have faith and intuition are more gullible. And there is, of course, a theoretical reason why they were doing this weird experiment. Because there's a theory about how we reason that says we reason about evidence in 2 ways. Some people say we actually have 2 reasoning systems in our head. I don't believe that. I think we just have 2 different strategies for evaluating evidence. But we have an emotional, automatic, magical thinking system of decision making that happens very quickly. And so, if you're not completely involved in making the decision, or if you're under time pressure, or if it doesn't really matter to you, you can take that first answer that comes to mind. More influenced by emotion. So the happy people who are gullible took that route. We also have a rational, controlled, effortful, resource-loaded, logical way of thinking where we examine the evidence, we seek out the facts, we think about it coldly, rationally. It's slower, it's harder, and so we only do this if the result matters to us and if we've got time and not enough other tasks. So these 2 systems are in sort of parallel conflict with each other. We'll take a quick answer, and it's being wrong, more often than not right. Or we'll take a hard route and get effortful, tired, but get a more accurate solution.